A couple months ago, I had a chance to connect with Reverend Shannon and talk about today. And as she told me about the life of this church and how active it is, I knew immediately what I wanted to talk about. And so I'm really, really excited. And I've got a lot to share with you. And I'm so thankful that they told me I've got till about 1 o'clock today when the service gets done. So no, I've got way too much to share, but I'll do my best to honor all of our time so that we can be on with our day today. But just a little bit more background about me spiritually, so that you can just understand where I'm coming from. I grew up a nominal Catholic, and by nominal I mean we only went to Mass on Christmas and Easter. My parents split when I was young, and my brother and I grew up with my dad. And he was very agnostic toward the Catholic Church and God and everything that was associated with that. But when I was a senior in high school, the latter part of my senior year in high school, I had a full-on born-again Christian experience, and just soaked it all up. And it was at that time in my life, I was just amazed at God and Jesus could be so certain. And looking back, people say, James, what were you thinking? What happened? What went on? Well, I can tell you, it was two things that at the time was provided me. Number one, a sense of the dogma provided a sense of clarity in a world that for me was chaotic and unpredictable. On the outside, I was a really good person. I got good grades and got along with people, but on the inside, I was a mess. And so, wow, the dogma and the clarity was just brought some structure and order to that. But the second thing that community did was brought a sense of belonging. Belonging. If you sign up for these beliefs, you belong to this family and to this tribe, and in that world, it was us against the world, and it was just very easy to get into that. But very early on, I started to have some inner struggles with this. The message of love and acceptance and boundary-breaking, radical love, that turns communities inside out and upside down was really attracted to me. But I couldn't get over the only one way being Jesus. And if you don't, you're going to go to this really bad place when you die. I was never really happy. So long story short, skipping over a lot of things, about 8 years ago, all of that deconstructed, and I found myself 5 years ago at the Center for Spiritual Living in Seattle. I went through ministerial affiliation and licensure, and have just been so grateful for this community and to be able to work and serve with Reverend Kathy Ann Lewis up in Seattle, and the entire staff up there has just been great. And even as I talk to you now about it, I just feel chills of gratitude for the roots that I've been able to set down, as well as the expansiveness and the welcomingness, if I can use that word, of what that community has been to me. And so it's with that sense of gratitude and respect that I'm here this morning. And what I want to share with you this morning about Polarities comes from a place of deep care and deep passion for our movement and what it represents. Some of what I say may be a little provocative. I hope not. It comes from a place of love and care, but I am curious to know how it lands for you, because it's actually, I hope I can say this okay. I'm teaching a class at the end of June on religious recovery, and so a lot of these ideas are coming from that. But I care so much about this movement, as I know we all do, that we want to grow. And my intention here today is in sharing what I want to share is that the consciousness of activism and work that you're doing in this community will both, one, deepen from a place of conviction and love, as well as expand. Maybe expand in some ways you haven't thought of or dreamt. But the container that I'd like to hold for us here, if we can co-create, is a container of love. Is a container of love. I really believe that what is divine and what is sacred is fundamentally love, and love is all that which is fundamentally divine and sacred. Call it God, spirit, force, life, whatever you want to call it. I'm not sure who this quote is attributed to. I think it's Ernest Holmes, but I've Googled it and I haven't found it anyway. But one of my things is that love is an intelligence that seeks expression. Love is an intelligence that seeks expression. And therefore, you and I are expressions of that love. And something else I'd like to offer you then, if that is true, then maybe love is not something we have, but rather something we what? Give. Something we give, yeah? And something we are. I heard it over there. Yeah. What would shift in your life if it was true that love is something that you already have? It's not something you have to go out and get. It's not something you have to go out and earn. It's not something you have to even deserve, but you simply connect back to it. Another quote of mine that means a lot to me is by a gentleman named Armand Bitton, who says, when your heart is open, you don't need to know the rules. You create them. I wonder what kind of new rules could be created if we brought a greater awareness of our own love to our lives and what we're doing. I think it could be powerful. I love the vision and the mission of this church. Recognizing our oneness, we envision a world that works for everyone in all creation. And the two words that I highlighted in that is everyone and all creation. Are we there yet? We're getting there. But if a vision is a good one, like this one, it's aspirational, and it's something that we won't fully see realized in our lifetime. Truly. I love that. And I love the mission, though, providing spiritual tools for personal and global growth and transformation. Oh, I love that. I love that. That is something that we can see in our world today. And so what I want to talk about as we think about the unfolding of love and the expression of love in our communities is this idea of polarities. Polarities, and including polarities in our life. The message title is including. We could call it welcoming polarities, valuing polarities, leveraging polarities. I'm not sure. It's just, this can all do that. But what is a polarity? Well, a polarity is simply the presence of two seemingly contradictory ideas or realities, such as liberal, conservative, expansion, consolidation, change, stability, decentralize, centralize, individual, collective, order, disorder, freedom, structure, darkness, light, known, unknown. I think you get the idea. Can you think of any other polarities as I've just been listing them? Any other come to mind? You just shout it out. Or not, okay? Dark and light, what's that? Oneness and separation, absolutely. Yeah. Love and fear, love and hate. Uh-huh. What? Good and bad? Uh-huh. Chaos and peace? Sure. Love and beauty? Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's one polarity in particular that I'd like to play with a little bit this morning. And before we get into it, I would just like to invite all of you to just, again, take a moment and connect back into the love that you have and the love that is here. So if you would, just take a moment and take a few nice deep breaths. Just allow yourself to become aware of the presence of love here and the presence of love within. Maybe call to mind things that bring you back to love. Maybe it's loved ones, animals, ancestors, guides, nature. Just allow yourself to sit with the awareness of the love and the fullness of love that is here. And then allow that loving awareness to drop down inside, and particularly in your body. And if you're noticing any places in your body that might be holding tension or discomfort or feeling a little out of sorts, can you just bring loving awareness and kindness to that? And with this loving, kind awareness of your body and your presence here, I'm going to offer 2 words. And the invitation is to just notice where or how these words land in your body. Or are there thoughts and feelings that are connected to them? And maybe not. Maybe nothing will. And if so, that's okay. Again, this isn't a test. There's no right or wrong way to do this. But the first word I'd invite you to bring into your consciousness is spiritual. Spiritual. Where and how does spiritual live in your body? Are there words, sensations? Just make a mental note. And the second word I'd invite you to bring into your consciousness is religious. Religious. Again, without trying to fix or change or maybe even understand, just noticing if anything's shifted or not. Just expressing now to yourself and to this community love and gratitude. I invite you to take a few more nice deep breaths and gently allow your eyes to open and come back into the space here. You may want to, I'd invite you, if you're taking notes or something, maybe just jot yourself a little note about what that experience was like. But and if you're online, maybe you could drop in the chat, spiritual, religious, how that landed or how that felt. But any of you here be willing to share just, how did spiritual land? How did it feel in your body? Anybody have anything to share?
It felt flexible.
Flexible? A vessel. Uh-huh. Beautiful. Beautiful.
That way too. Spiritual was an awareness that had my body. Religious went to my head.
Interesting. So spiritual had your body, religious went to your head in the context of a vessel. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Spiritual was in my neck and my shoulders and my upper body tingles and around my head.
Wow. Neck, body, shoulders, tingles, where spiritual lives? Fascinating. Fascinating.
Religion was at all the tips of my fingers.
Religion, the tips of, fascinating. Good. What? Embraced in love. Good. Anyone over here? Yeah. Okay. So let's, with that, transition. Some of you have already touched on this, but how did religion set? So you mentioned darkness or cold and flat. Uh-huh. Thank you. Yeah. What else? What was about the word religion? Or, yeah. Yep. Stern, one way, closed with religion. Yeah, yeah. It's quite a contrast to spirituality. Yeah. One more? Yeah. Yeah. Spiritual, fluffy, religious, a blanket, a covering. Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Spirit within, religious out there.
The rules of the world.
Yeah.
This is the rule of spirit, the feeling of spirit, that's the rules of the world.
Yes. 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 So I'm guessing by now you probably know where this talk is going, right? Oh, wow, rocket science, okay? How many of you have come across people or might even categorize yourself as spiritual but not religious? Is that you? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so popular, yeah. And it makes a lot of sense, right? For many of us, we carry a religious background that had some external force or entity or person or whatever impose upon us a way of being that wasn't congruent with who we are. And it came from that sense of, for others, it just could be a sense of ignorance. I wasn't raised with anything, so I don't know. But religion, I associate with that, and with it, there's the fragrance and the aroma of guilt, duty, obligation, fear, punishment. And in many cases, I use this word quite intentionally, abuse. Because I think of abuse as anything that denies an individual's humanity and spirituality. And so religion has this way of doing that to us. And so fittingly and properly so, there's a reaction to it. But I'd like to come back to our mission, and I'd like to come back to our vision, and I'd like to come back to the roots of this movement as I know it and understand it and love it. Can religion and spirituality coexist? And I'm wondering what that looks like. We're going to explore that in my class I'm teaching at the end of June. So I can't help myself. I'm excited. Okay, I'm not trying to peddle stuff or whatever. Okay, but here's what I mean. What would shift if the story, the religious story that all of us bring, could be held in a consciousness of love, unconditional acceptance, unconditional validation? Could love shift the story? Could love change the story? And here's why it's important, because if religion is something that we're supposed to eliminate or expunge from our life, or not maybe even connect with the pain of it, what it does is then it kind of sits in the back seat like a backseat driver and drives our lives. At least this is how it's been for me. And the reactions and the aversions and the things that I have, instead of moving intentionally and consciously towards something, I'm running from something that I don't like or something that has hurt me. And so this is where I think, what could happen? What could happen if we as a community, we or you as an individual, this is just an invitation, could describe ourselves as spiritual and religious? I like etymologies, word etymologies, and the etymology of the word religion is from the prefix re, which means again, and ligio, ligament, which means to connect or to bind. So at its very, very essential root, religion is to again connect, again bind. Now, whatever your religious experience was, whatever your church experience was, and I know, unfortunately, the unhelpful world very, very well, too well. But if we introduce love and this life's journey and this community's journey and our work together was about connecting again to a love that we already have, that's already enough, that's already sufficient, that's already perfect, and all the trials and tribulations and ups and downs and ins and outs of going there. If life is about returning to that love, could religion be whatever it is for you or for me to connect again, to connect, bind to the love that is already ours, and then spirituality becomes the expression of it. All that expansiveness, fluffiness, airiness, joy, and that all of you said that you experienced spirituality with. Religion just becomes the practice that gets us there. And I've been involved in CSL for about 5 years, and I just got to tell you, there's a religion to what we do here. There's a liturgy to the service. Wonderful music by the choir. By the way, I feel so blessed to have the choir here today. Yes. I don't know if I said this earlier in my bio. I was a pastor in the evangelical tradition for 28 years. I was a part of a big church in Seattle that, their theology was pretty much Southern Baptist. And the first half of that 28-year career was as a choir director, a music director. So I love choirs. Yes. and I appreciate that and feel so blessed to be a part of that. And why did I tell you that story now? I lost my train of thought. Anyway, yes. Oh, I know why. But there's a religion, there's a formality to that's there, okay? And I'm hoping that maybe we can recognize in our practice here, there's a liturgy to what we do, an opening song, a blessing, a reading, a message, a talk, this, that, and the other thing. All it is just a form, it's just a structure, and it's okay. It's neither right or it's neither wrong. I've had a chance to circle with so many people in this world, who describe themselves as spiritual, not religious, and I can't help but notice the religiosity to their practices and their imagination, whether it's talking about past lives or spirit guides or twin flames or ancestors, and then the labels we put on things as pagan or Wiccan or not that, These are just things that the mind does to make sense of it all, right? But can we in love just notice our minds doing that and kind of hold it with a laughing, joyful consciousness, okay? That's what it is. When I was going through my spiritual deconstruction 8 years ago, I had a dear friend who thought I was becoming atheist. So he turned me on to this network of former Christian ministers who are now atheists. And so I would listen to these guys talk. I'll tell you what, they preach with all the passion and all the fire and the brimstone of the Baptist preachers that I was leaving, getting out of. I couldn't believe it, But it's just interesting. Whether it's atheist, agnostic, not Gnostic, whatever, it doesn't matter. Labels are helpful in bringing clarity and context and all that to what we're doing. So I'm not saying don't have labels, don't have them, but just understand the limits of their value and their worth. Words are very helpful, but they're also limiting because they divide. They're divisive. And so in bringing all of this to, okay, well, so what, James? Now this is great. What could this mean for me? What could this mean for us? Here's the question that I would just pose to us as a community, and though I'm not here often, although I'd love to be here more, this is just a great place to come and get energized. For us, I'm including myself as a big fan from Seattle now, so into this whole thing, but as we think of being religious and spiritual, Richard Rohr is an author who's been very helpful to me, and in his book, The Universal Christ, he says, we don't think ourselves into new ways of living, we live ourselves into new ways of thinking. And so when I think about, the science of mind, and yes, the power of the mind to create our realities, yes, but that power, my friends, comes from the heart, not from here. The language of the mind is logic, it's reason. It's survival. This organ, this wonderful organ we have up here is fundamentally for our survival as a species, and it's wonderful. But I would just offer that our heart and our gut, that's the language of love, the language of mystery, the language of moving forward. And so oftentimes these internal conflicts that we have is this, wanting to go back and wanting to hold on to what's familiar and to what's new, fittingly and properly so. Many of you have been a part of this church for many, many years, and there's a comfort and there's a familiarity of coming here and knowing the ministers and hearing the message and being encouraged with that. Yes, it's great. And can we give loving awareness, too, to the heart, which wants to keep moving into mystery? How can you know if you're living in polarity? Because you're living in the mystery. You're living in the unknown. You're living on the edge. I think it was Jim Whittaker, the first American to summit Mount Everest, who said, if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space. And I have a feeling this congregation here is a room of edge livers. You're living on the forward edge. You're out there making a difference. But the path and the experience of love's expression is that of order, disorder, and reorder. And here's where I was going with that other thing. Richard Rohr talks about spiritual movements. They go through a life cycle, starting out as a movement, and then becoming a machine, and then becoming a monument. Now, he's a Franciscan priest. So he's speaking about the context of the Catholic Church. And if we look at the Catholic Church, it's real easy to see how its roots and its beginning is in the early 1st century and 2nd century. It was a disorganized, decentralized group of people who were just committed to radical love. Something else that I do on the side that I really enjoy is studying the Gnostic Gospels, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Philip, Gospel of, because it's the untold side of the story. When the New Testament was canonized in the 4th century, these were writings that were not included by the councils of men who decided this is what it was all about. But anyway, this force for good in the world that was started by this person named Jesus of Nazareth. And by the way, there's a difference between having the faith of Jesus and having faith in Jesus. You know, having the eyes, the heart, the ears, the mind to love the world, as he did, yes, that's something that can be very helpful and useful for us. But what happened over the life cycle of the Catholic Church is in its infancy, pre-Catholic days, it was this force for good. Then when religion or spirituality met empire and power, things went sideways. This is a word for those of us today who wish that we might have leadership in our world that's more favorable and more conducive to our cause and in our movement. Dangerous things happen when religion and spirituality marry politics and empire and power and control. Are the challenges that we face today real? Absolutely, but there's no better time to be who we are today. When things are the way they are. There's no better time for that. People, my middle daughter, I have 3 kids, a 30-year-old son, a 26-year-old daughter, and a 24-year-old daughter. My middle daughter lives in Atlanta, Georgia. The other 2 live up in Seattle. Going to the South, it's just like entering another world. Hello. Well, even the drive from Seattle to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, that's a different world, and it's a different culture that's there. And people always say, oh, Seattle, you got to get out. It's just so irreligious. It's so unspiritual. I'm saying, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? People in the Northwest are as spiritually hungry and vibrant and open as they can. What they're not doing, fittingly and properly so, in my opinion, is they're saying no to tradition. They're saying no to the things that don't serve anymore, and they're keeping their eyes on love, dreaming and imagining new ways to be a force for good in the world. Yes, it's so good. Hallelujah. But here's the thought where I'd like to leave it. It's real easy to look at places like the Catholic Church or some of the religious places and goes, yeah, those yucky yucks. How could they be that way? But something that I think is much more useful, much more humbling, and much more sobering is to ask ourselves today in this congregation, what is the now of then? Or what is the now or the here of them? In other words, instead of looking at the other guys out there and poking the finger at all the things that they do wrong, what are the things that we might be holding on to here that are limiting us? I don't pretend to know what they are, but I do know that each and every heart here is a good heart, fundamentally good, with a spirit and intuition that is good. And if we can hold some of these tender questions, in consciousness, great things could happen. I believe if Ernest Holmes were here today, he would say, read my writings. Yes, let them nourish you. Let them feed you. But for the love of God, don't take them as gospel. Let them take you to the God who gave them to me and receive that fresh word for today. That's what I would want. I'm no Ernest Holmes, I'm not going to say that, but I mean, for my life, for everybody's life, don't listen to the words of me or whatever. Rather, let my words provoke you and take you to the God, to the vine, to source, to spirit. Again, whatever you want to call him, her, she, it, whatever, and let that fill you, let that inspire you, and let that draw us together. Because love is that which binds us together. Is it always comfortable? No. As they say, there's no learning in the comfort zone, and there's no comfort in the learning zone. There's going to be friction. But this idea of if we keep ourselves done that, we keep this movement as a movement and keep it from becoming a machine with mechanisms that we have to keep running. And lastly, it can ossify and become a movement. A monument, where instead of the organization existing for the good of the community exists for the good of the organization. And I've seen that happen in so many so-called Christian churches that I have a real thing that I don't want to see it happen here. And so that's why I kind of I kind of provoke and kind of keep us on the edge of things, and always living in paradox, and always living with polarity. When we hold polarities, here's another polarity. We can understand ourselves both as creators and being created. I'm all for the power of the mind to manifest and call in dreams and goodness. And as those dreams and goodness are called in, there's a forming and a creation that happens. I love the opening song that we sang. We let the love wash over us. We let it be. We let the peace wash over us. We let it be. We let the joy wash over us. We let it be. So easy to sing, right? Easy to practice? No. I've been through 3 major losses this last year in my life. Identity stripping losses, things on which that I have built my identity. Life has taken them away, and it would be real easy to look at it as cruel, unfair, unjust. And there's a big part of me in my wiring as a 58-year-old white cisgendered male that can go there. But how grateful I am for my community of love, like this one, the one in Seattle, the one that's emerging in Idaho, and I don't know where else is going on. We need each other. As I think it's Ram Dass who says, we're just holding each other's hand, walking each other home. So much more to say. We'll put just a quick comma there, but I want to end with a poem and a prayer. Reinhold Niebuhr, if any of you have heard of him, he was a pastor, a minister in the U.S. in the early 1920s and 30s, I believe. But I think he really, in this poem, captures the working out and the expression of love in our communities. And I just want to share it with you, and then we'll pray. He writes, "Nothing that is worth doing can be achieved in our lifetime. Therefore, we must be saved by hope. Nothing which is true or beautiful or good makes complete sense in any immediate context of history. Therefore, we must be saved by faith. Nothing we do, however virtuous, can be accomplished alone. Therefore, we must be saved by love. No virtuous act is quite as virtuous from the standpoint of our friend or foe as it is from our own standpoint. Therefore, we must be saved by that final form of love, which is forgiveness."